Pastor, once again. Thank you for letting me come and talk about things that are just totally fun for me to talk about. I always like venues, and I was telling somebody that was here earlier, when I was in kindergarten, the very best days were show and tell days. So I'd bring my little fire truck or something, and it was as good as it got. So fortunately, I get to show and tell today. It's just as good as it gets. Anyway, but we're going to talk about dinosaurs. Incidentally, look, do you like that picture? Okay, just if you're ever feeling like you're really hot stuff, you're really important, you're really big, just take a good look at the deep space picture from Hubble Space Telescope, and that you see here. Is this working? Yeah. That's a star right there. That's a star right there. Everything else you see here is a galaxy. Every other thing you see there is a galaxy, on average having 100 to 200 billion stars per. So you're looking at roughly 10,000 galaxies in this picture. If it were darker like back there on the TV, it'd seem even better. They just did a study. Somebody in Nottingham, England took it upon themselves to recheck, restudy the subject of how many galaxies there are. And they just published their finding. Up until that point, it was considered to be fairly stable at 200 billion. Add another zero. 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion. If I said this already here, I might have. 2 trillion. And add to that 200 billion stars per. You're getting up to the number of 400 septillion stars. Some math nut on the internet, decided, I know somebody's going to ask it, so I'm going to do the research. And he went and studied how much sand there is on the beaches in the world. And every beach he calculated, put it all together, and found out that there are many more times stars in the sky than sand on the beaches of this planet. Okay, just so you know. I think there's something about that in the Bible, I'm not sure. But anyway, more than the sand in the sea. So, yes, do we have a large God? Inconceivably big. Okay, so let's talk about dragons and dinosaurs. Let's get right to it. The book of Revelation mentions that there is a dragon. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Oh, there's a dragon in the Bible. What does the word dragon connote to you when you think of the word? Something like that? Red and pointy and fire-breathing and all that kind of stuff? Is that what you think of when you think of dragon? Well, that's what you're thinking of, because that's not in the word itself. The word dragon itself simply means large reptile. That's all it means. So when you bring those other images to it, you're bringing probably mostly medieval images of fire-breathing, pointy, red things. Now, I want you to remember that because large reptile is significant in the rest of this talk. But keep that in mind as we look at dragon. So I'm going to give you a modern history of dinosaurs, and I like that subtitle so well I gave myself a little smiley face. That was pretty cool. A modern history of dinosaurs. Yeah, that's cool. So anyway, let's take a look. When I'm talking to kids, I say, look at that guy. Don't you want to be a scientist? That's a guy. Okay, Robert Plot. He was the head of the chemistry department at Oxford University in 1676. Came across a bone from England. And very similar to this bone right here. And this is a bone, dinosaur bone. And he wrote a science paper on it. However, he misidentified where this bone came from. Can you imagine where he would think it came from? What kind of animal? This is England? No. No. They don't know about dinosaurs yet. No, didn't think it was a dragon. Elephant's correct. Thought it was a Roman-era elephant. But actually, because we've seen what he wrote about, the pictures and everything, no, it was a dinosaur bone. He just didn't know it. Now, let's go to America. In 1836, a pastor, Edward Hitchcock, was pastoring a small town in Connecticut, saw footprints on the side of the road there that looked like bird footprints. And so he imagined that years ago, there were giant birds walking around there, leaving footprints in soft mud that became rock. What he didn't know was he was looking at dinosaur footprints. Probably about a 6-foot-tall dinosaur left these footprints. All right, again, he doesn't know about him. No one knows about him. Let's go to England, back to England. And a physician, Mantell, and his wife came across some bones, and a tooth in particular that was interesting. Showed a tooth to some friends. This is in the 1820s. This goes back a little bit. And asked them, can you tell us what this tooth is? And somebody said, well, it looks like an iguana tooth, but it's too small. I mean, too big, 20 times too big. And so that led to the discovery of an iguanodon, iguana tooth. Now, these are the first images. Now, there's 1859, they found more bones. And they imagine, these are the first pictures of what imagined to be ancient animals that used to live. Now, yes, keep going. Here we go. This guy was actually a Christian. And he was probably, if you'd never heard of Darwin, would have been the most famous British scientist of the 19th century. He set up the British Museum, and he coined a term. He was an anatomist by profession, came up with the term Dinosaurs, which means awesome lizard. Man, your old books say terrible lizard, but terrible is a terrible word for 2017, so we're going to go with what was equivalent, an awesome lizard, and of course that means Dinosauria, and dinosaur. So I like to point out to various groups, secular included, a Christian came up with the name dinosaur. So they were finding big bones, but not a lot of them. Now let's go back to America. Dr. Joseph Leidy had a museum in Philadelphia, an institute, Science Institute in Philadelphia. He heard about a woman over the border in New Jersey whose backyard was producing big bones. Went and approached her, said, can I dig up the big bones? Take them to my museum. Yes, he did. He assembled them. He did not have a skull, so he made one out of paper mache. Put it on top of the bones, put it on display, called it a hadrosaur. Folks, 1858, this is the first dinosaur skeleton on display in the world. You go to museums today and it's no big deal. In 1858, it was a huge deal. And this being America, he found out he could sell tickets. So the line went down the street and around the corner. This being America, other museums noticed and said, we got to get these bones too. And so they started to hire teams of people that would go out there. If you like historical novel kinds of things and just some of the interesting, intriguing things that happened in history in America, there's a lot of stories about the two dinosaur hunting teams that were competing against each other that went off into Colorado and Wyoming and Montana, digging up bones and just about using every scandalous way of doing it and getting the bones back to the museums that paid top dollar. So kind of fun stuff. But anyway, in America, again, nobody had seen stuff like this before. And the first things that Christians were asked by the skeptics is, hey, where does the Bible say stuff about this? Now, if you've been about Adventist schools your whole life, some of your lives look like they're, go back a bit, nothing personal, and me. You may remember days when some science teachers wouldn't talk about dinosaurs. Can you remember some of that? I've had people come tell me that are denominational workers that tell me that. So anyway, they would say things like, I think the devil put those bones in the ground, or something. So we didn't have a lot of good answers for a while on this. We have better answers now. But back in the day, it was a little slow for us to come around with some good, solid answers. And again, remember this. This was 1858. When did Darwin publish his Origin of Species? Next year, they were finding in Germany, in a cave there, some bones of a man that had lived. When they put it together, he was bent over. The first drawings of that man was a hairy-looking ape kind of guy, and that caveman image stuck like glue. They later studied those bones and found out the guy had rickets. He was boned over, and they found many Neanderthals that walked straight up and down like you and me. But anyway, the image stuck. Then they found that Archaeopteryx fossil of the bird/lizard. And they were finding all kinds, with the dinosaurs, it started to look like Darwin was onto something, okay? Something had happened over history. Perfect storm for evolution. They started to find more iguanodons in Europe, that's in Belgium there. And even American dinosaurs started to make the trips to the Louvre. There's a Diplodocus that's in the Louvre Museum around 1900 and so forth. So it's starting to build these images around the world of these giant creatures that were found. Now, of course, the Smithsonian has got to have one. And so they found a Brontosaurus, put it on display in 1905. And there it is, and that's a beautiful, large sauropod. They called it a Brontosaurus, named it Thunder Lizard, Brontosaurus. And experts came in and looked at that and said, that is a marvelous specimen. Just look at the are you sure about the head? Turned out they had the head from a different dinosaur on it. So anyway, they have an Apatosaurus body with a Camarasaurus head, and this leg here comes from a Camarasaurus head. Put the two together and called it a Brontosaurus. Now, to this day, if you want to talk to a dinosaur nerd and get a good article, conversation going, ask them this question. Do you think there's such a thing as a Brontosaurus? He will have an opinion, or she will have an opinion, trust me. And there, off you go. It's a fun thing in history of dinosaurs. Now, this is a Camarasaurus. And a Camarasaurus, there's a little bit of a scale picture. And for years, the best bone I had in my own personal collection was a lower leg bone. Looked like that, and that's from a sub-adult. Do we have any sub-adults here today? A sub-adult laying here. A sub-adult is like a teenager, early teen, that kind of thing. So I had it from a sub-adult. Now, however, I've got this. Now that's the real deal there at the museum. So come and take a look at the real deal. When we were putting this together, and there was some money that came available to purchase some nice things for the museum. I prayed about it. I said, Lord, give us at least one thing that's a wow thing. In other words, something that people would start saying, have you gone and seen that da-da-da-da? Fill in the blank. So I started looking for a wow thing, and we were able to stumble across this big bone. It was in two pieces. It was in South Carolina, from a very advanced collector that was found in Utah, where they find these things. And we were able to, I could give you all kinds of stories about how we ended up getting it. I mean, we had found a truck that was coming that saved us $1,000 in expenses of shipping, all these different things. But the most interesting story is the company that actually mounted that on that metal stand there with a stand that's 850 pounds. Took 5 of us. You should have seen it. If our angels recorded that, I want to see it. It would be pretty entertaining. But anyway, 850 pounds. And the company that put that together also was capable of making a very nice cast like that, molded and make a cast. Then the fellow asked me, where's this going? And he's quite a company there. He's got museums and National Park Services as clients and so forth. And where's it going? So I told him where, Union office. And he said, I went to Adventist schools as a kid. So now we've got a relationship going with this guy. It's kind of fun. Anyway, God thing. So there's that bone. You come and see it. For years then, the thing about dinosaurs was how big they were. So that was the image, imagining how big a dinosaur would be. For 50 years, the only bones we're finding were vegetarian dinosaurs. Safe, except don't get stepped on them. That seemed to be the scariest thing, right? And they found something that they had not seen before. Something with teeth. This was in 1905, and I've been in Wyoming it's an upper northeastern corner of Wyoming. I was down a country road with a fellow who said, Stan, see that hill up there? That's where Osborn found it, the first T-Rex. So, Tyrannosaurus rex, or king tyrant lizard. And this is what it looked like when they put it up for display, 1905. Incidentally, almost all those bones are not real, but that's typically what you see in a skeleton. I hate to burst your bubble there, but it's very rare to see a dinosaur skeleton with the real bones. It's usually casts for a variety of reasons. They're heavy and they're brittle and everything, and they want to study them, so make casts of it. But there it is, 1905. Now, get this. This changes the whole image of dinosaurs. Now suddenly you're going from just big elephant-type things to big lion and tiger type things, totally different feel. And people's attitudes about it change quite a bit. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of things about T-Rex because I get lots of questions about T-Rex. One thing we know they ate was Triceratops. Why would we know that? Found in a stomach of a skeleton and cavity of a skeleton of a T-Rex are bits and pieces of Triceratops. Now, your next question might be, oh, how would they know that? Well, I don't have it here, but it looks kind of like this. I have a toe bone of a Triceratops. Triceratops, the three-horned guy there. Triceratops, if I were to show this bone to this toe bone to a dinosaur nerd, and there are lots of them, he would look at this and say, or she would look at it and say, that's the middle toe on the right rear leg of a Triceratops. And they would be right. That's how much they know about bones. They are real experts out there on this stuff. So, okay, we know Triceratops, but it doesn't answer our big question of whether it was a predator or a scavenger. Why would we wonder about a T-Rex being a predator? Short arms, right? Who could, what could it catch? Also, if you're thinking about it running something down, look at that big carriage. There's a whole lot of weight that's got to get moving. Sometimes I'll mention to people, see, now a hadrosaur lived in the same neck of the woods as a T-Rex, a big giraffe-sized vegetarian dinosaur. We know that these ran 25 miles an hour. Oh, how do we know that? Because T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. Okay, anyway. There's a skeleton there. That's a real interesting fossil they recently found where it actually has a Triceratops and a T-Rex all preserved together. The T-Rex has crushed ribs. The Triceratops has teeth marks on it. And they're quite sure these two died more or less in combat. So, but we would say, oh, but preserved in water. Okay? Because obviously they were covered up in a flood. Discovered in 1983, these are the first, there's actually two now known footprints of T-Rexes that they're quite sure of. Look at the size of this. Now this is 33 inches long. It is 28 inches wide and 9 inches deep. 9 inches. So we're talking about something pretty heavy. Yeah, pretty cool. Now this T-Rex is in South Dakota in Hill City, downtown there, and it's named Stan. No kidding, it's named Stan. Named after, I think, the person that discovered it. And for years, Stan was the best T-Rex they'd ever found at 40% complete. Now, here's a trivia question for you. How much of an animal do you have to find before it technically becomes a skeleton? Give you a percentage of the animal you have to find, and it suddenly rates as a skeleton. 20? 50? 2? Cynic. 1%, even worse cynic. Actually, 10%. 10% qualifies an animal to be a skeleton. You found a skeleton over against remains. Now, that's interesting because whenever you read these articles of animals that have been discovered, they might say, we just found a skeleton of something. So now we know a whole lot more about that animal than we did before. Okay, but it might be just a leg, a couple of vertebrae, and it could be fairly incomplete. Just, that's kind of interesting. And skulls are far and away the hardest to find. Skulls are always the thinnest, bones break into a bunch of pieces. I went to a rock show in Tucson, Arizona, and it was a world-class fossil dealer was there. And he had big fossil skeletons for sale for 6 figures and so on. But he had a little pile of T-Rex skull fragments. How much for the whole box? And I bought the whole box to give out just pieces. You want a piece of a T-Rex? Here it is. Now, I wouldn't trust that from most sources, but that was a world-class source. That was fine. So anyway, kind of fun. So, okay, but that was 40% until they found Sue. Have you heard of a dinosaur named Sue? A dinosaur named Sue was 90% complete. A beautiful thing. For dinosaur lovers, beautiful. Sue is beautiful, and she's on display at the Field Museum in Chicago. So whenever you're in Chicago, I know that's on your vacation list, go to Chicago, downtown there, right next to the lake, and you want to go see Sue. And incidentally, they have also sold tickets. Do really well. They bought Sue for $8 million, and which I think is a steal. $8 million, I think it was a steal. And when they sold Sue for $8 million, all the other prices of dinosaur skeletons suddenly went up because it just pulled the whole ceiling up. Anyway, not that you're in the market, but okay. Now, one of the coolest things about T-Rex is what we found out in 2005. You may have heard of Mary Schweitzer, the head of a science team that did some studies of the bones of a T-Rex they found in a field. They took them back to the laboratory and actually dissolved the bone, trying to study some things in it. They actually over-dissolved the bone. They did too much dissolving. They got down to the real center of it, and actually what they found out was something that has shocked the science world incredibly. They found soft tissue. What I mean by soft tissue, I mean things like flexible vessels and what looked like the stains from red blood cells. All of these things could not possibly be still around at the minimum age of this rock, this skeleton, which would be 65 million years. That's absolutely the newest a dinosaur can be, is 65 million years. It is not possible to preserve soft tissue like this for 65 minutes. You can encase it in lead and it won't do this. So now, and this is based on their own studies of other things prior to this, wondering how long it takes for DNA to break down or proteins to break down. They've done studies of this way before this happened. So they already had years and dates and rates and everything before this happened. So now they are looking more carefully at dinosaur bones, because they never thought of looking in them for things before because, of course, they were too old. Now they're finding proteins and chitin and collagen, and in a couple of very, very controversial, still to be decided things, even a couple of bits of DNA. So all of these things are very interesting. Mary Schweitzer, who was a Christian, a theistic evolutionist, the head of this group, said, oh, the creationists are going to get us on this. So she was right. But she came up finally with a very good science answer. And incidentally, this has been attacked by every conceivable science organization from the day this came out as poor science, awful, terrible. So, oh, you gotta have made a mistake. She's redone all of the studies to make careful, eliminate all other possibilities. They're now beginning to see this as being established. So anyway, she made a very good science comment after this. She said this, and this is good science. Either these things are preserved better than in systems, in other words, preservation can take place in ways we have yet to understand and preserve these things better, or they're not as old as we thought. The bones are not as old as we thought. And that's good science. That's a solid science statement. Okay. Let's finish up on a couple things here on dinosaur footprints. Footprints are evidence. And there's a place in Texas, Paluxy River State Park. That's in central Texas. You all want to go there in August or September. Well, the good news is there's a creek there. And there are kids splashing around in this creek. And there are dinosaur footprints all around them. Real dinosaurs, not Disney-made, genuine, real deals. Very interesting, and it is this area where there has supposedly been, let's see, do I have a picture? Yes. A picture where supposedly some people have purported that there are human footprints on the same strata as dinosaur footprints. And there is a guy walking to try to give scale to a set of footprints at least some people think are human. This has been looked at very carefully studied by creation scientists who don't have a problem of humans and dinosaurs living at the same time. They've looked at it and they are unconvinced that they are human footprints. And I could go into a lot of detail about those studies, but I'm also in that category of believing they have not found human footprints next to dinosaurs. You keep going down the same trail and eventually you'll see some that look more dinosaur than human. There's a lot of things going on there. And if you are into it, incidentally, the person that really pushed this a few years ago was the Seventh-day Adventist. So his name was Burdick. and he really believed he had evidence of human footprints next to dinosaurs. It was sensational, but it's been looked at very carefully, and we don't think so. And incidentally, for those who believe that pre-flood people were larger than they are today, the things that they were presenting were usually small as today's size footprints, so that wouldn't work that way either. Anyway, I'm in that category. If you want to come and argue your case, I will listen. I want you to know I have an open mind, in one ear and out the other. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. I'll listen to anything. Water can do funny things with footprints. There you can see some dinosaur footprints. Water can change the shape of things. Okay, let's talk about hadrosaurs. Hadrosaurs, incidentally, I don't believe people and dinosaurs lived in the same zip code. I just don't think that would have been, you wouldn't have lived in the same place of, yeah, okay. All right, let's take a look at hadrosaurs. Hadrosaurs are interesting critters. They are giraffe-sized dinosaurs. And it used to be for years when we'd find a skeleton, we'd just rip the rock open and get the bones out and off we go. We wanted the bones. Now they're a little bit more careful because you can actually get casts of the skin. Because when the dinosaur was covered up with mud, of course eventually that mud hardened, but the body would deteriorate, but it would leave the cast of the skin. And so now they have skin impressions like this one I have in my hand that's pictured up there. And if you take a look at it carefully, sure enough, it's reptile skin. You see scales, just like snakes or lizards and so forth. So yet another reason to believe that they were reptiles. Now, what about dinosaur eggs? Now, I used to think as a kid that they must have been the size of Volkswagen Beetles. Surely. But no, actually, they're no bigger than this. This is a dinosaur egg from China. It's where most of them come from that have gotten out to collectors. And it's solid. It's been filled in with sediment, and it's rock solid. But this is a dinosaur egg of maybe a hadrosaur, we're not sure. But they don't get any bigger than that. That's as big as they get, which means that even the very big guys, like the Camerosauruses, started off really small. So that's kind of interesting. Interesting for discussions involving such things as ark and so forth. But anyway, what about dinosaur egg nests? Why would a nest be a problem for a creationist? Why would the idea of finding dinosaur nests be a problem for creationists? No. Well, what's happening in the fossil record? Dirt, pile, mud, rocks, and everything. And what? All of a sudden, we got a place with an established nest in the, dug out of the ground and everything, like it's been there for years, with all the fossil record down below it. Do you see the problem? In other words, anything that looks like a nest that's been in the ground, that ground was there for a while? No, what we believe the fossil record is a continuing elevation of dirt and rock and mud and so forth that's coming up like this. And so there shouldn't be a lot of time anywhere to make a nest. So what we think is, and now they've done studies and they're showing that almost all of the nests, not all, there's about 5 or 6 that are still puzzling in the world, but most appear to be places where eggs fell in or floated into and got caught in the water. Does that make sense? And little depressions and so forth. Now, again, you would never have studied to look for that if you didn't have a creationist flood model in your mind. But actually, they've shown pretty good evidence that that's how those nests actually got there. It's just a thought, throwing that out. And there's an embryo in one, some bones in an egg, but 99.99% of these eggs do not have bones in them, which is another interesting thing and possibly related to the flood. Okay, I'm going to show you now what you guys are going to do next June. So get out your calendars, and this is what you're going to be doing next June. You're going to go to Wyoming, a beautiful place, northeastern Wyoming. Quite literally the least inhabited county and the least inhabited state of the 48 states down below. Then you are going to go there and you're going to be participating in a dinosaur dig. Yeah! Who wouldn't want to do that? And you pull up to this site, And this site is run by Southwestern Adventist University out of Keene, Texas. And they have a connection with the owners of the property, which a Christian family who's owned this ranch for 100 years. They don't want the bones to be studied by evolutionists. So there was a connection made. The Lord kind of connected some people together, and one thing led to another. And now Dr. Art Chadwick and Southwestern have rights to this property and come every year to dig up 1 year's worth of bones to study and catalog and come back for another bunch next year, kind of thing. And they're looking for volunteers with little or no education. And you pay a little fee for food and so forth. It's very reasonable. So anyway, you can go for 1 day or 30 days. It's up to you. How cool is that? So anyway, Southwestern, swau.edu/dinodig. You just got it. And Dr. Chadwick or somebody like him will have a morning worship after breakfast, tell you where you're going to go, your group is going to go there, or your group's going to go there, and off you go, and you dig dinosaur bones. And there I am digging up a hadrosaur rib bone, pretty cool, big bone of a dinosaur. I'm using, I don't know if you can see there, there's a little squeegee bottle right there, and I squeeze the liquid in there onto the bone, and it just goes right into it, makes it harder, hardens the bone so it can be moved easily. And there is about an 18-inch layer of dirt here that, or it's kind of a mudstone, soft stone. And in that 18 inches, you can't practically put your shovel in without hitting something. It's that thick of bones. One of the premier dinosaur bone deposits in the world, right here. And now that we'll wrap up bones and take them away, but before we wrap them up, we will have somebody like Dr. Chadwick or somebody else come with a GPS locating system. They got it triangulated down there with base stations, so that down to a fraction of an inch, they will record the position of each bone before it's removed. Later, they'll take a picture of that bone and to scale, drop it into a software package like this. Folks, this is cutting edge. It's as though they removed the dirt and you're looking at the bone still in the ground. Isn't that something? And it's even 3D. You can turn it this way and look at the depth of it and everything. About 18 inches. Now, this is what they find there. Take a look. That's almost all bones from hadrosaurs, mostly hadrosaurs. And what can you tell me by looking at them? What do you not see? You don't see skulls because that typically would give you an idea it's been transported and broken up. Now notice there's no skeletons. It's all disarticulated bones. So, and if you were to look at the bones individually carefully, you might see some rub on the corners. In other words, like it's been rolled. I'm going to tell you, okay. I asked Dr. Chadwick, because this is Badlands coming over from South Dakota, so these shallow canyons. I asked him, I can see the layer over there, doctor. Have you surveyed over there? Yeah, we surveyed there. How about over here? He said, we've done the whole area. You're finding the bone density the same everywhere? Yes, we are. Wow. Do you have an idea of what we're looking at? And he said, yeah, somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 hadrosaurs. 5,000 and 10,000 giraffe-sized dinosaurs. Okay, what can put them in a deposit like that? Only one thing. And whatever it was, something killed these dinosaurs, and before they were exposed to the air and the dinosaur bones to start to deteriorate, the bones, the bodies, were rolled. And rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled until the bodies fell apart. Sorry. And finally, they all settled in this deposit and got filled up with mud, got covered up. Now, what does that sound like to you? Sounds like one of the phases of the flood, doesn't it? And you can't really come up with any other better explanation than that for what happened to this bunch of dinosaurs. Does that make sense? So, pretty interesting. So, you got it in your calendar, June. That's what you're doing next June. Incidentally, they take kids, you know, young kids. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what the break is on the age. Does the Bible tell us anything about dinosaurs? Remember, the word dinosaur comes from the 1840s. The word's not going to be in the Bible. But does it tell us about anything that sounds like dinosaurs? Well, how about the fifth day of creation God created great sea creatures. The word creatures there is tananim in Hebrew. And tananim is usually translated reptiles. So, I don't know, maybe, great sea reptiles. But how about this? Now, let me set this up. Job. After Job's dealings with the devil, God finally breaks in and starts talking to Job, and among other things, God starts bragging, frankly, about his creation, the cool things he has made. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And among other things, says things like, I tell the waves they can only go so far. In other words, the waves that broke in on you, Job, can only go so far. I've been limiting what's happened to you. I'm still in charge. Still in charge. I made the ostrich. Ostrich is kind of a funny, frankly dumb bird. He says it. I didn't give it much intelligence. Which is another way of saying Job, so sometimes I don't tell everything I could to my creatures. Limited intelligence. Okay, but among other things, he talks about two very interesting animals. Number one, Leviathan. Brags about Leviathan, a whole chapter, Leviathan. And among other things, the description of that animal, it's like it has plating skin. You can't pierce it very easily. It causes the water to boil. And scholars have said probably a Nile crocodile. I actually agree with that. Probably a Nile crocodile. Because a crocodile, when it has something prey, it will roll and make the water look like it's boiling. I'll go with that. Same scholars say about behemoth, hippopotamus. Let's see if you agree. Look now at the behemoth. The word behemoth means beast. No help in the word. Which I made along with you, Job. Sixth grade of creation. He eats grass like an ox. Vegetarian. See now, his strength is in his hips and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze, the ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Now that last phrase really got me. I wanted to know, what does it mean, first of the ways of God? What's that about? First of the ways of God. Is that a chronology? First thing made? Or more likely it's talking about first place in the impressive animals contest. In other words, the alpha of all animals. It stands as king of the beasts, the most amazing animal ever. First place. Okay. Hippopotamus. Moves his tail like a cedar tree, and literally in Hebrew, sways his tail like a cedar tree. You ever seen a hippopotamus tail? It doesn't evoke images of cedar trees. And neither does second place elephants. How about something more like this? And this would be a legendary animal to Job. There's the south end of a hippopotamus. There's Job. How about something more like this? That sways his tail like a cedar tree and would win the most impressive of all animals contest. It's a possibility, not a hill worth dying on, but I still think better than hippopotamus. So anyway, and it would be a legendary animal to Job in his day. Okay, I'm going to leave that with you. Now, let me ask you this question. Do we, creationists, believe in evolution? What does the word evolution mean? What does evolution mean? Change. Do we believe any animals changed? Oh, suddenly we believe in evolution. Or at least a certain kind. Did the animal that tricked Eve look like that? Did she see a snake in a tree and go, oh, look, there's a snake. I think I'll go over and take a look. No, it didn't. And we're not quite sure what it looked like, but Jewish tradition, as well as other writings, suggests something with wings. So it was in a tree. So whatever it was something that Eve found interesting and went over. Now, notice what God says to the serpent after the sin, after the fall, after the trickery. And now I'm going to ask you to do something. This is an experiment. I want you to take your Greek heads and unscrew them for a moment, put it on the shelf. And then take your Hebrew heads and put them on and screw them on and think like a Hebrew for just a moment. Because you can't do that. You're Greeks. You're Westerners. Okay. Notice what God says to the serpent. You are cursed more than all cattle. Now, cursed for a Hebrew, they get. They understand what that is. A curse is something that tangibly makes something less than what it was before. Tangibly. When you curse something, you don't just simply wish them a bad day. You actually are invoking God to make something worse than what it was. On a converse of that, blessing something made it better than what it was before. It's more productive, it's more something. It's better than what it was before. That's Hebrew thinking. And when God says, cursed are you to the serpent, he's saying something, you are now changed. You are now less than what you were. Does that make sense? Okay, you can take your Hebrew head off and put your Greek one back on. But I just want you to understand that, because Greek, we have a hard time imagining cursing and blessing in the proper way. So you're cursed more than all cattle. In fact, God even says, this is how it's going to look. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust. So serpent is now going to be something more like what we're looking at there. Whatever it was before, it wasn't that way. So something has changed. But notice it says cursed more than all cattle. So in other words, he's saying you're feeling the effects of sin the most, but all the animals are going to feel the effects of sin, and they're all going to be cursed, i.e. less than what they were. Right? Are you following? So what does that less than what they were look like? Well, again, among other things, violence was what God targeted the animal kingdom as well as the human kingdom on. The animals become more violent in terms of behavior. So let's take a look at some animals. So things started to look like food. Now I want you to look at this critter right here. This is an ankylosaurus. I got a little ankylosaurus right here. They're the goofiest looking things ever. They look like little tiny tanks on 4 legs. They've got spikes all over their bodies. They've got a club for a tail that they would whip around and use as a weapon. And they've got, look at the heads. The heads are armored. This little guy looks like he lived in a world that was combat-oriented, violent. Stegosaurus, same thing, had tail that had spikes in it, whip around as a weapon, bony plates on the back for protection. And look at this nodosaur. This was found recently in Alberta. And look at this guy. This is beautifully preserved, but look at that thing. It's all bones and plates and armor and everything else. And you look at stuff like that and you wonder what kind of, I don't see that living in the Garden of Eden. I'm not sure. Pachycephalosaurus even, which means bonehead, basically, ran around with very thick skulls and so forth. Again, what kind of animals are these? Now, Adventists have a very unique view of some of this, and we wonder if maybe some of the animals were bred. And I would suggest to you that makes sense to me, especially in the sense of the ones we've seen that look really unusual to us appear to be combat-oriented or violent-oriented. In other words, they were either bred or created to be warriors, battle wagons, or hunters, or sport for stadium, or whatever. But maybe the ancient people thought they could make some pit bulls or Rottweilers or something out of them and went about doing that. And those are the ones we have preserved in the flood. It wouldn't be whatever original things they might have made them from. This is just a fairly unique Adventist view. But anyway, possibility. Now, you don't have to be a meat eater to have sharp teeth. Take a look at these 2 skulls right here. These are bear skulls. The one on the left is a panda bear, and then the one on the right's grizzly. An evolutionist, whenever they see a sharp canine tooth, that means one thing only, and that is meat eater. So what does a panda eat? Bamboos. Eat anything else? No, that's it, bamboo only. And so what will an evolutionist say about that? Okay, it used to eat meat. Okay, can you see it being a predator? Come here, you. Anyway, panda must have been some kind of a predator before. Again, because it has canines. Even a grizzly bear doesn't have to. It's an omnivore. It eats anything. But it doesn't necessarily have to survive. It can eat berries and so forth. If fish are right there, we'll eat them. But anyway, point is, you don't have to be a meat eater if you've got canines, sharp canines. Speaking of sharp canines, hey, here's a dinosaur tooth on the left next to a wolf fang to give you some scale. This is from a Spinosaurus, and a Spinosaurus, you can see that one right there had a nice ridge in it, or I should say trough in it, from the tooth that came down from the other jaw and kept biting like that on it. So you know what that means. This poor dinosaur needed braces. Needed braces badly. But anyway, and it came from this guy. And this guy was actually bigger than a T-Rex, and he's kind of like a crocodile on steroids. It kind of looks like that. But most teeth from dinosaurs are actually like this. That's a Spinosaurus tooth or a Triceratops tooth. Most teeth from dinosaurs tell us that 90% of dinosaurs are vegetarian. And that is a good thing. Oh, here's a picture of pterodactyls. And pterodactyls are the flying dinosaurs. I put those up there because people think, I know there's something about dinosaurs evolved to birds, right? Guess what? Not from flying dinosaurs. So let's talk about dinosaur to birds. And incidentally, this is one of those areas where if you talk to an evolutionist, they're like, this is well established. What's the matter with you people? You know, dinosaur to bird evolution is a slam dunk. Okay, let's take a look. Fair enough. Two theories. And this is in the evolution camp, two ways of imagining it. Large ground bipeds, two-legged dinosaurs. So, what would get in the way of this becoming a bird? What would be the challenge of that evolving into a bird? Big, heavy tail. Got to get rid of that. Got to lose some weight, don't we, in the back here? How about these arms becoming big wings? Going to be a problem, right? So what we're looking at is the arms have got to get longer, the back legs have got to get smaller, and the tail's got to get smaller. Developing hollow bones would be helpful. And also, of course, we'll talk about feathers in a minute. But large legs, small forearms, heavy tail's a problem. So they have another theory also, and it's called small crocodiles from the trees. Not kidding, that's their title. I'm not making fun of it. Small crocodiles from the trees. So the idea is a crocodile would be up a tree, it would see food out there away from the tree and would jump. Okay, and grab it. If it could go further, it could grab more food and make more babies. So over time, somehow or other developed skin flaps, you know, like flying squirrels and that sort of thing. And over time, developed wings. And over time, that included feathers and so forth. So skin folds to wings, that has to happen. You think you could find that in a fossil record. Lungs, now lungs, let me tell you about a reptile lung. A reptile lung, very slow breathing, very slow. Birds, on the other hand, when they're flapping, are breathing every time they do it. So they're going, that's what the lung is doing on a bird. So the imagination of going from the slow reptile to a fast one is a little hard. But feathers, okay, feathers come from the bumps on scales. See that bump, bumpy scale? And that's a feather right there. I'll do it slowly so you can see the subtle. So maybe that was too fast for you. Let me do it again. Okay. And this becomes, those bumps become follicles coming out of the skin and becoming a feather. Any questions? So, whenever you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, you are actually going to Kentucky Fried Dinosaurs. I'll take a bucket, a crispy bucket of dinosaurs, please. Trust me, there are people that really push the bird evolution thing very much so, to the extent that some evolutionists are tired of it. So it's kind of funny to see the fighting back and forth. But for instance, National Geographic really pushes bird evolution too, because they feel like this should set the case and get the creationists off our back. So they keep talking. Anyway, so they will write articles about T-Rex. And T-Rex, I'm reading this article about a T-Rex, and the mother T-Rex gathered together her chicks. Chicks. Oh, come on. Do we have an agenda or what here? But anyway, okay, T-Rexes have chicks. So bird evolution, here's the thing. The bird evolution idea is the bird starts, the first one's Archaeopteryx, middle Jurassic, okay, in the layer of, now I had somebody last night think when I put something like this on here that I was saying I believed in millions of years. Okay, so I make it clear right up from the front I don't, but I put this up as a standard model to compare. Okay? Okay. So here we go. Feathered feathered birds go down to here. And in the fossil record, dinosaurs, now you got flying dinosaurs, they go down lower, so that's helpful. Maybe that to that. No, 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 no. Not flying. They came from land dinosaurs, two-legged dinosaurs. And you can see that's helpful because this is deeper. So the potential is for one of these guys to become the ancestor of these. Going over this way as we go higher up the layers of rock. Okay, here's a problem. I just moved that down because we now have footprints of birds down that far. And that's a problem. You're getting down close to the beginning of dinosaurs. Let me show you. This was found in Argentina. And these rocks are difficult for an evolutionist to explain because they are no question to be Triassic. They would love it to be in a different layer. But they're not. They are in Triassic rocks, and it's a footprint of what appear to be something like a seagull. Hopping around, hop, 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 hopping around in the mud before obviously taking off, going somewhere. Now, it is a bird because it's got the rear toe, the helix, so it's definitely a bird. So, here's what the Argentinian scientists said about it. It's significant because we find footprints with morphology, that shape, identical to modern birds and rocks that predate by 55 million years the first record of true aves, that's birds. So, what is he saying? We got footprints here that are 55 million years too old. Because we don't have any birds in the fossil record for another 55 million years. Just got footprints down below. Now, what would that sound like to you? Sure sounds like a bird landed because the waters were rising. Hop, 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 then flew off. More rock came in and eventually got caught, but higher up. Does that make sense? Anyway, so kind of interesting. And again, if you think I'm making this up, just punch in Argentina and bird footprints. Okay, so what happened? What happened to dinosaurs? Here's one of those rare times where we actually agree with evolutionists. They agree with us. Something took them out. So anyway, for the most part, that's it. And there's a KT level. This is very famous. KT level, KT boundary, right there, the top of the layer where dinosaurs are found below but not above. So they find in this rock layer, they find evidence possibly of meteorite dust, and that's what they're beginning to say about it. That's a big theory. So here's a question for you today as we, did dinosaurs sneak on? Oh, I got to do that differently. Let's do that again. Oh, do it slower. Come on, slower? Okay, we'll let them walk on. Did any dinosaur sneak onto the ark? Well, here we go. Let me run a couple of things by you that are kind of interesting. Number one, let's talk about size of dinosaurs. Now, people think that dinosaurs were all big. They're some of the biggest candidates right there. But the average size of a dinosaur was the size of a large dog. Average size. And they got as small as chickens. So, here's my trivia question for you. What is the anatomical difference between a dinosaur and a lizard? An anatomical, structural difference between the two. Legs? No. Oh, wait for a while. Let's hear a few things like size and stuff like that. Size? No, it's not size. Hips is correct. Hips is correct because a dinosaur has a lizard has legs that go straight out. And so a leg, they basically get around like this. Whereas a dinosaur has hips that put the leg straight down, whether it's four-leg or two-leg, gets the body off the ground. That is the anatomical difference between a lizard and a regular lizard and a dinosaur. And you can excite your friends with that bit of knowledge and trivia. And anyway, incidentally, there are two styles or two kinds of hips in dinosaurs. There's bird hips and then there's lizard hips. I don't know, it doesn't sound very complimentary, does it? Bird hips or lizard hips. But anyway, between the two kinds, bird hips or lizard hips, which do you think evolved into birds? Bird hips or lizard hips? Lizard hips are correct. I don't know why that just seems funny to me, but anyway. Okay. So the femur, this is the femur, this is the leg bone. So this is like that part of the dinosaur right there. Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things here. Grand Canyon carving was discovered in 1924. Looks like a T-Rex type biped dinosaur. That's interesting. Remember, it was only discovered 19 years before, so there's a fairly narrow possibility of graffiti. But more importantly, there's national memories of dragons. Dragon stories all around the world. Giant lizards. Why do so many people around the world talk about in the ancient days there used to be these giant lizards around? And you ask an evolutionist, they'll say, well, they found, occasionally find bones like this. And I said, well, where would you get a lizard from that? Where would you imagine that was part of a lizard? Because to people living in those old days, medieval days, a lizard was simply a pest. It was something on the wall in the kitchen or something. It was just a pest. There wasn't anything scary about a lizard. You just didn't want them around. Nothing scary. But if you find giant bones, you might imagine something scary of something that was scary in your day. Like, in other words, maybe a giant lion, tiger, or bear or something. Why not think along those lines? Why is it consistently big lizards? And I would suggest to you it's because, just like history adds a little embellishment over time, that there are kernels of truths of ancient memories of when humans and big lizards lived together. Now, what's an interesting question, if you believe that, the next question is, okay, is this pre-flood or post-flood? In other words, did some of not the giant dinosaurs, but maybe some of the smaller dinosaurs, remember they could be the size of dogs, get on the ark and become legends later on. And incidentally, what's interesting about dragon stories is something like, they're typically like this. There's a town, a village somewhere. Nearby there's a cave or under a bridge or something, and there's this big lizard. And this big lizard is a problem. It's either munching on cattle or people or something. It's a problem. And so they're tired of it. So they send a knight over or a mob or something. They dispatch it, and that's it. There aren't any more. A couple of things that are interesting is there's never more than one. It's like the last one. There's never herds of them or anything. I don't know. I just wonder if maybe some did get on the ark, becomes part of these legends. Marco Polo casually mentions he saw a dragon in a cave in his trip to China. No big deal. Saw a dragon. Dragon means large reptile. So I don't know. Maybe they did get on the ark and humans caused their extermination, like mammoths, for instance. We're pretty sure we hunted mammoths to extinction. It's a possibility. Again, maybe not hills we're dying on, but it's interesting that we have that. Now, the earliest picture we have of a dragon, interestingly, is on the Gate of Babylon. Something that looks like that. A medieval kind of looking thing. Now, I'm going to close with this picture. I'm going to put this T-Rex, I'm going to make him scary for Halloween, right? We're going to put a dragon head on him. And here's what I want you to look at now. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan who deceives the whole world. What does the word dragon mean? Big lizard. Does the word dinosaur mean? Awesome or big lizard. I'm going to put the word dinosaur in there, and let's change it around. So the great dinosaur was cast out. That serpent of old. That's not a bad translation. That serpent of old called the devil and Satan who what? Deceives the whole world. Now Revelation 12 precedes Revelation 13, interestingly, which also precedes Revelation 14. All of these are ending up into last day things, issues. And the deceiver wants to deceive the world into not believing that the world was created by a creator. To not believe the six-day creation story and that God didn't want death to come into the world. All of that. He wants to deceive the world into thinking something else happened. Wants you to think that you were an accident, that you were not that you were only here by a bunch of fortuitous natural events. You're animated pond scum. Okay? And not created by a loving creator with the hands of God in the image of God. What single image deceives the world into thinking something other than Genesis. Isn't it that? The picture of a dragon, a dinosaur. Whenever people see a dinosaur, don't they say, oh yeah, millions of years, not Genesis. It's a powerful image for many people to discount the story of the Bible. And I'm just thinking, what a better image the devil might use than that to try to convince the world that the story in Genesis isn't true. So, with that, I conclude, and I will now answer questions that you might have on dinosaurs, anything else related to these issues we've talked about this week. In fact, should we do a microphone thing? What do you think? Pastor, what do you think? You're not ready for that, so as you go talk to the smart people up there, there's one down here. Okay, let's let you ask me some questions, and I will give you answers that are worth every bit of what you paid to get them. Yes.
I don't ask very good questions, so...
Is that on? I can hear. Okay.
Okay, I'll
there you
talk
go.
into it. I'm sorry. So in science and in evolution and all what you're talking about, how do we know the sizes of these things? Okay, I understand that, but how do we know that they were I don't know how to answer the question, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay, but they do find enough of the animals over time to put them together. Okay, yes. When you get 40% of something, that's not much. But if you find several of those guys, you can put together.
That's what I was going to say. When you only find 10% of something,
yes,
how can you really guarantee
yes.
that was that large?
You know what's kind of interesting? I did this talk over in Scappoose in Oregon, Scappoose, west of Portland, and a fellow approached me as I was talking about this bone. A guy came up to me afterwards, and he was a ranger. He worked for the government. He's a member of that church, and they call him Ranger, I don't know, Rick or something. But anyway, yeah, pastor. So anyway, he showed me something, and he showed me a thigh bone of a shrew. You know what a shrew is? Smaller than a mouse, little bitty guy. The thigh bone was identical. I mean, in every detail to that bone right there. And of course, he anticipated what my next thing would be. Can I have this? And he says, I've got two. You can have one. But anyway, I do use it sometimes to illustrate how God will take a single theme and do all kinds of things with it. Watch what I can do with this kind of thing. So anyway, yes. Sir.
So one of the things that's often presented as sort of almost incontrovertible is radiometric dating.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Okay, I'll speak to it, and I will give you an incomplete answer because it's not all out. I knocked over a dinosaur. Radiometric dating is really interesting to me. I'm into it as much as anybody I know. I've got a Geiger counter. I've got radioactive elements, quite a few. I have a lot of fun. I'm the only pastor I know who could buy a Geiger counter and write it off on their income tax. But anyway, the decay of rocks and isotopes is very interesting to me. On paper, it looks like solid science. It is still one of the questions we have. I'm going to get into a little bit of theology now for just a minute. What is decay? Is decay part of God's original plan? You don't think so, and I don't either, but there's some that aren't so sure about it because the world operates so well with entropy and decay and cycling, recycling, and things like that, circles of life, whatever, however you want to put it. It seems like there's some design to what's going on. So what is decay? Romans 8 says that the whole creation groans under the burden of decay. Whole creation. And just before that, he was talking about people. And then it's like, but the whole creation, which is clearly more than people. So I pose this to a theologian. You know who John Baldwin is? Seminary professor, emeritus theologian. And he's into this too. So we go back and forth. I said, do you suppose that Romans 8 is also including rocks? does the mineral kingdom experience the burden of decay? Okay, he hadn't thought of that. He thought animals and plants and things. So I'm not sure what to make of decay. One time I went to a creation conference with some of the world-class speakers, scientists there, and I'm there just as a student listening to these things. And there was a guy by the name of Russell Humphreys, who is an expert physicist, creationist. I went up to him after the talk, along with all these other people. We're all gathered around him. There's going to be another speaker pretty soon. You're probably only going to get one question in. Make it a good one. So anyway, Dr. Humphreys, do you have a theory of what happened at the time of sin in terms of the physical effect on the environment? And he lit up like I was wanting that question. Why, yes, I do. You know, I believe that something like a shock wave went out to the creation when sin happened. And we didn't have time to follow up. I'm thinking shock wave. The point is, I'm not sure what to make of decay given a short age understanding of the earth. There may be some theological aspects of this that we have not yet understood yet, and I really want to pursue those. Has decay happened in rocks? No question. Has happened. Did it happen all at once? Or did it happen over millions of years? One of the interesting things about decays of rock is one of the byproducts is helium, one of the daughter products. Helium is still in the rocks. It's not in the atmosphere. A quick read of that would be to suggest that something caused the decays of the rock very quickly. Helium hasn't had time to get out yet. That's a very interesting thought, worth pursuing a little bit. Point is, what do you do when, just like this dinosaur T-Rex, you break open a bone, it dates to 65 million years, and yet you get soft tissue out of it? They found a Triceratops horn recently that inside was soft tissue. These are very difficult to explain. If one dating system says 65 million years and the other says thousands of years, do they cancel out? Which one do you go with? You know what I mean? So the point is, it's not the slam dunk we think it is, the radiometric dating. It's stay tuned. We're going to find other things out, I think. But theologically, I'm still wrestling with what is decay and where did it come from. Here's the thought. What's the wrath of God? Give me a definition of the wrath of God. Romans 1 talks about the wrath of God. What's the wrath of God? The wrath of God killed Jesus on the cross. What's the wrath of God? It's a pulling back of God. It's a stepping back. Separation. So if God steps back from nature, from a planet he's not welcomed at anymore, does nature suddenly start to fall apart? You know what I mean? Because God's a sustainer. You see where a lot of this can go. And to me, I drive some of my creation science guys nuts. Because it's, Sam, what can we do with this? We can't get into the laboratory and do, can't do science with it. It's mostly philosophy and imagining and everything. But I don't know. It just is opening up all kinds of interesting things to me. What killed Jesus on the cross? When he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Was he kidding? No, the Father had forsaken him for a moment. He stepped back. What he would do with any sinner who didn't want God in his life, he honored that request. And it killed Jesus. So, what does it do to nature? Okay, anyway.
We have a young man right here.
I want to hear the question.
Do people eat dinosaurs?
Do people eat dinosaurs? Did they eat dinosaurs? They probably did. As I think about it, yeah. I think so. When the world was violent in those days, everybody was eating everything. We think about dinosaurs eating people. It might have been the other way around, too.
Good question.
It's a great question. I've done this a lot, and I've never gotten that question. Okay.
What is the biggest dinosaur in the world?
The biggest dinosaur in the world, there's a lot of people that like to say they've discovered the biggest dinosaur in the world because that would make them famous. Okay, now that's a cynical approach. But they find what they usually do is find the best preserved bone, and that's usually a leg bone or a vertebra. And they find a big bone like that, and it's maybe a couple of inches bigger than that. Maybe there's just a little odd shape to it, and they said, ha! We found a different species of something that's never been found before. And because it's a little bigger, we're going to imagine it's another 5 feet longer, and it wins the prize for biggest. So it's a little sketchy, but Titanosaur is a big dinosaur, 130 feet long. 130 feet long is pretty long. Almost half a football field. So anyway, we're talking big. Yes.
Rick, we have another question over here.
We do? Where?
Right over here to your left.
To my left. Sir.
Okay, what I want to know, well, my wife wants to know, if dinosaurs really exist. According to scientists, they did exist.
Yes.
But we always had a discussion that she doesn't believe in that because
You don't believe in dinosaurs?
She doesn't believe that God would create such a thing like that. But
What-
that was
what's
like
scary about
thousands and thousands BC, before
Yes.
Christ.
Yes, yes.
And I believe, there was no human being back then, so. And then
Oh.
according to scientists also, I know that the reason why they were so big because there was bigger trees, bigger oxygen, so more
Yes.
oxygen.
Okay,
Bigger.
Okay, that always gets me to one of my more favorite points, and that is, why would God make giant dinosaurs to begin with, if he did make them? If he did, well, why make giant ones like this? Pre-flood conditions was like a greenhouse, forced plant growth. You could practically watch things grow. God needed giant hedge trimmers. Okay, you guys, now that's funny. You guys had too much lunch. I did too. That was a really good lunch. Sister, are you Adventist? Are you Adventist? Seventh-day Adventist? Seventh-day Adventist. Yes? Okay. Ellen White talked about some mammoth animals. Mammoth meant big in her day, that died in the flood because they were too big, but not because they were amalgamated or any other wrong reason. So she does talk about things being before the flood that were big. Animals were big. She understand English? Got that? Yes. Now that's what we're talking about. But she says that all the species that God created, all the kinds that God created, were on the ark. So if they're medium to small dinosaurs, they would have been on the ark. That might have been potentially what became legend later on as dragon stories. That's just a speculation. But what I love about my theory is you can't disprove it. Who's next? Over here. Oh, right here first. Sir.
Yes. I read an article here lately, or ran across an article about T-Rex being
Yes.
very, very slow. That they
Yes.
suspect that he might have been an ambush predator or just a scavenger.
Yes. Yes.
And plus, you were talking about decay regarding the sun, what it does. I understand it breaks down hydrogen into helium and gives off energy, which,
Hydrogen doesn't break down
oh, I mean,
helium.
it does fusion or something like that. And so we can give off energy. It gives off energy so we can live.
That sound, chlorophyll?
Is that,
Plants, maybe? Chlorophyll? I'm not sure.
is that decay or when the sun's doing
Oh,
it?
is decay giving off energy?
Well, I mean the breaking down of the hydrogen and stuff.
Hydrogen doesn't break down. It's as small as it gets. It's
Well, I
hydrogen.
mean,
Hydrogen is as small
I guess
as it
what I mean, it comes together and then the product is helium and then energy is given off. Fusion, I guess.
Oh, fusion wouldn't be from decay.
It wouldn't, okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I was getting my terms mixed up a
Well,
little bit.
your first thing. What was your first thing about again? That you started to talk about. What? T-Rex.
T-Rex.
Oh, yes. remember I told you if you want to start a discussion with a dinosaur nerd, talk about brontosaurus. Do you think there was such a thing as a brontosaurus? Second question. Was a T-Rex a predator or a scavenger? And they have opinions on that. And they go both directions. And I remember watching in the news, scientists now believe that T-Rex was a predator. Months later, new evidence suggests that, yeah. Anyway, over here, yes.
So last night you spoke about the animal variations, that not every single animal had to be on the ark.
Correct.
That there's variations.
Yeah.
So then if dinosaurs could have been on the ark, would that have been just one specific type that would have given to various?
There's quite a variety of dinosaurs, and it would be, no, I don't think so. There'd be several kinds. I'm of the opinion, for instance, that we don't have as many species as are said, because I think, okay, kids would understand what I mean when I say long necks, right? You're with me on long necks. So I think long necks was probably a general category of dinosaurs that there would have been variations within. So more than one, but not hundreds. Maybe a dozen, a couple dozen. Yes?
My question is about when Mount St. Helen blew.
Yes.
You talked about that last night.
Yes.
And how it became an example of a Grand Canyon. It automatically, the layers.
Yes.
Are they studying that to just see? You said something about the time it took, and the time it took the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, those kind of subjects are interesting to creationists. Am I making myself clear on that? The scientists probably would, it's not that big a deal that you got an immediate, quick thing there. Sure, because that's Mount St. Helens. There's no Mount St. Helens around the Grand Canyon. Yes.
We have one back here.
We do? Okay, go ahead. First here. Oh, yes.
What's the smallest dinosaur on Earth?
Smallest dinosaur was this big. I forget the name of it, but it was this big. It's pretty cool, huh? Wouldn't you like a pet dinosaur? Okay, I'll ask you guys a question that kids answer differently from you. Are you looking forward to dinosaurs being in heaven? Okay, a couple of you. Most parents are like, kids are like, yeah. Now, between the two, who's God going to listen to? Give it up.
Yeah. Can you tell me what relationship there might be between evolution and adaptation? Because in my idea, the birds with the skinny beaks and the thick beaks was adaptation, not evolution.
What was difficult for creationists to do was to react to Darwin when Darwin first came out with this. And that one of their first reactions was, okay, there's no change in animals. God made everything you see today is exactly the way God made it. It's called fixicity of species. And that was our knee-jerk reaction to pushback. Now, more we've studied, and I was just at a conference in St. George, Utah for the denomination, and they had a couple of hundred people, teachers and pastors there, listening to these speakers, great speakers, wonderful speakers. And there's a fellow from Southern Adventist University who was a biologist who was talking on some of this. And he was sharing with us the more recent studies on genetics that suggest some of the things I think I said last night, and that is you don't need species level differences. You can move it up to families, and families can be the source of all the variation that we see. Like I mentioned, for instance, cats or whatever. So we don't, and what happens is there is some adaptation that takes place in populations, and that's the key word there. In other words, a single one won't change, but if you have a flurry of kids, the ones that are best adapted to that area will probably pass on that adaptation to the next kids. Incidentally, here's an interesting one. Boy, and I don't know quite what to do with this, but they've done a study to find out that genes in people, in animals anyway, can show, how's the word, inheritable differences that were learned. Okay, let me give you an example. They took, I think it was a rat. It was either a mouse or a rat. Let's go with a rat. They took a rat, and there was a pleasing smell to the rat. And the rat would come over to the pleasing smell, and they zapped it to where it wasn't a pleasing experience. They kept doing it over and over and over again to where it did not come back over to that pleasing smell. And it had babies, and the babies wouldn't go over to the pleasant smell either. Now that was something that they learned after they're born. So some genes were affected that were transmitted to the, now this is new areas, folks, and it makes you wonder a little bit about that thing God said for the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Looks like hating can be passed on or whatever. You know what I mean? Something's going on there. So, and it has to do with genes that are somehow turn on or turn offable, something like that. Am I right? Something like this. And this is a new thing. So you're going to see more on that. I don't know if I even began to answer, but I hope I did. Yes?
My idea for the size of the big dinosaurs
Yes.
was to compensate for man's size. The Bible says that Adam was 11 cubits, and if a cubit is 18 inches, that would make Adam maybe 16 or 18 feet
Well,
tall.
now let's just be careful. The Bible doesn't say that about Adam.
That's what I read.
Show it to me in the quote. We got Bibles right here in the room. You just thumb it open and show me. Now, okay, now, Bible. I thought you said Bible. Did you say Bible? Okay, Bible. Now, let me tell you where from the Bible only we get the idea of giants from before the flood. Can I tell you? Okay, the word Nephilim is there. And the word Nephilim is a very difficult word to translate. It's a rare word. It's only found one other place in the Old Testament. And modern scholars, Jewish scholars, are stuck on the word. They have a hard time defining it. So, there is a source that translated the word. Now, this source, have you ever heard of the Septuagint? The Septuagint is a 200 BC translation of the Old Testament into Greek by Jewish scholars that wanted their Greek-speaking kids to be able to read the Bible. So they translated the Hebrew word. When they came to Nephilim, they used the word in Greek gigantes, which is giants. King James came along, had no clue what to do with Nephilim, but they look at the Septuagint and assume the Jewish scholars in 200 BC had a better handle of what to do with the word and went with the word giants. Now that's the history of where we get the word giants from, apart from any spirit of prophecy or anything else. So I think that's reasonable. The word Nephilim literally, though, is difficult, but may be related to the violent nature of the person because it seems to have a root that's related to the word of cutting something down. Cutting something down. It might be there were people that cut things down in those days. Now that sounded like a violent term. That's a possible translation of Nephilim. But yes, I believe spirit of prophecy, but you have to be careful on where you quote these things because not everybody understands and appreciates spirit of prophecy, like I do. Yes. This young man right here. Is this the man with the blonde hair? No. Yeah. Is he the one that was up here? Did you count him?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Do you believe that dinosaurs could show up today on the Earth?
No, I think all dinosaurs are extinct, sadly. Now, you might hear of Mokalamembe or something like that in Africa. And let me tell you what Mokalamembe is. You have some Americans coming into a little village, and they've got a picture book. And they start to flip open pictures. Have you ever seen this animal before? Well, that's a lion. Yeah, we got lions here. Giraffe. Yeah, we got giraffes. Yeah, water buffalo, sure. Oh, what's that? We never seen that. Buffalo, American buffalo. Haven't seen that. Oh, Mokalamembe, sure. for just $500, we'll take you down to the river and I'll show you where he was last seen. So they go down there to a place where there's a nice flattened area of reeds next to the water, like something big laid there. And you might see something kind of like it, but you never see anything else. Thank you for your $500. And are you catching what I'm getting at here? That's Mokalamembe for you, as far as I can tell in reading the stories. I don't think you can hide a giant dinosaur in this world today. I don't think that's possible. A smaller dinosaur? I don't know. Is there a plesiosaur still swimming around in Loch Ness in Scotland? You know what? There may have been at one time, becoming the source of later stories. But if you knew how many people in Great Britain were looking for Nessie and using every advanced radar system, sonar system you can possibly imagine in the hopes that they would be the one. I mean, there's motivation off the scale, and they have not found anything there. So I don't think you're going to find dinosaurs today. I wish you could, but I don't think so. Over here, yes.
I have a question about one of the things you said last night. I estimated 8,000 kinds got onto the ark, 16,000 animals.
Well, it was just a number, yes.
Okay, but I mean, that's a fairly good estimate, I think. Now we have approximately 8.7 million species on the Earth.
Yes.
And so species diversification, you would be getting 2,175 new species every year. That seems like a lot, and that would be something that we had noticed.
It's obviously not happening now. In fact, we're losing species now.
That proposes a further accelerated rate further in the beginning of the process.
It does.
And I have a second question, which is ice layers. 700,000 ice layers being deposited that we've core sampled.
Yes.
How is that explainable in a 6,000-year Earth model?
Very
4,000 years from the flood.
Pretty easy, actually. Ice layers are layers of remelts, water that is melted and refrozen. Yes. You sound like a uniformitarian. We heard about uniformitarian. In other words, rates don't change. And that is a standard science approach to all of these issues today.
But if you were to take 700,000 and propose that there were more than one season happening every year, the number of seasons you would have to have per year would be an astronomical number.
Yes, but the same people that believe that as being a slam dunk can't answer the soft tissue in dinosaurs. And what I'm saying is, there are still unanswered questions in all sides, and it shouldn't cause us to throw out our model because it doesn't cause the evolutionists to throw out theirs.
The soft tissue was explained by high iron content, and it was demonstrated that red blood cells were kept at room temperature for 2 years with iron.
It's found in was it Montana, where the conditions could not possibly explain. Actually, the worst place you could preserve something was Montana because of the terrain and the temperature fluctuations and everything. What you've talked about has pretty much been debunked by most recent studies because it was anticipated. And so Mary Schweitzer has been doing, you should read the latest on Mary Schweitzer.
It was the response to that study was that a group of people did an experiment.
Yes.
They kept red blood cells at room temperature with no protection for 2
Yes.
years.
Yes. What I'm saying is that because of those kind of comments, they redid the studies. And she's getting others to come around now that were skeptics before. So you need to look at the most recent stuff on that. The ice age, the ice thing is not completely answerable by what I suggested. It's the same as rings on trees, tree rings. Again, tree rings are caused by growth spurts. And I talked to a number of arborists, that professional tree people that say, oh, we have lots of times when there's multiple growth spurts within a certain single year. So the point is, there's still openings. Don't have all the answers on the ice yet. Don't. You have a comment. Okay. Microphone. Well, and that's the lightning. That's the P-38 lightning. It was found in Greenland. It was found in lower layers than they expected it to be. Yes. I'm not sure if it's directly relatable to this, but it was deeper than what they thought. And again, the Ice Age thing is based on the uniformitarian model. And that is, if rates are this way, how can you explain faster things earlier, since we don't see faster things now? And the Grand Canyon, stuff like that, all of the dating, in fact, all dating basically is based on uniformitarian concepts. The whole approach to uniformitarianism makes sense on paper, but when you see catastrophic things happening that also explain the data, you suddenly realize that there's sometimes multiple possibilities. And that's what we're suggesting. Where are we? Yes.
In science, there are even scientists that say that new theories accrue when old scientists die off. That it's a basis of old scientists dying to create new theories to be accepted. New theories are out there, but they are not accepted until the old scientists die off. How big of a factor is this in everything in science?
I'm going to share with you a very personal church pastor telling me a joke about his church. You ready for this? When he was asked by his conference president, "How is your church doing?" He says, "We're a couple of funerals away from church growth." Wonder what he meant by that. You never said that, Pastor, did you? I'm sorry. Yes.
How many types of dinosaurs are there?
Well, that's a really good question. That's a really good question, and it's not exactly set. I'm in the opinion that thinks that there are fewer kinds than some think. So maybe, yeah, I don't know if I can put a number on it, but it would be, in my opinion, closer to 100 than to thousands, and that's just me. Okay, anybody else?
Yes.
Sir.
Moving away from core samples, whether it's sediment or ice.
Yes.
What's the relationship of Ice Age to the flood?
Ice Age is actually a little easier to explain with a flood model than most anything else. Most uniformitarian models, the long age ones, basically said that for some reason the world shifted into very cold for a long time, and then for about 10,000 or maybe even more years. If you understand Ice Age as being something went wrong for a while, or something catastrophic happened that threw the Earth into a trying to restabilize panic mode, it would be the atmosphere changes of a flood that could potentially be it. If you have volcanic action to the level we're assuming, and warming the Earth's oceans to the level we're talking about, and producing lots of evaporation, water going over colder continents, it's really hard to explain how a mammoth could be frozen mid-chew with food in its mouth still. But something, cataclysmic had to happen, something that just went from temperate to very cold very fast. And I've got a number of bits and pieces of a mammoth actually here. When I say bits and pieces, I mean I've got mammoth hair from those in Siberia. You can get things out of Siberia easier than Alaska. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, Ice Age lasted, we think, a couple of hundred years and not more. And it would be, in essence, the stabilizing, restabilizing, reconfiguring of the planet after the flood. So for a while, cold land met warm air. I could get more technical than that, but that's pretty much it.
We have one to your left.
Maybe you already answered this question, but you said this dinosaur, you found the cells about 6,500 years. It comes down to about that.
65 million years is what they say.
Now, how can anybody believe that? I mean, of course they could.
It makes sense
but
if you have a certain
the world
worldview.
was void when God created it.
Yes.
And when he made man, that time, he also made the animals. And he went for Adam and named each one of these.
Yes.
Now, how in the world could they be that many years old, time of the flood, be that big? And if we know man was big because the animals were large. And that's, I believe, today we don't have these because we couldn't cope with these animals. And if they were that large, they probably were, I just don't understand that, because God wouldn't create something. Satan has a lot to do with this creation too, by breeding these different types of animals, and just like he does everything else. But anyway, that's I don't understand that. Why?
Why what?
Why Satan would intervene with
Satan?
breeding these things different too, because we know anything was on this earth before Adam.
Right.
It's 6,000 years. That's 65,000 years. That. So how does that appear with those blood cells being so red, being that age?
I guess I'm not quite sure what your question is exactly.
The blood that you said was 65,000 or million.
I'm saying that the standard understanding of the red blood cells in those dinosaur bones was 65 million years old. So how could it be?
Yeah,
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. See, I tell you, somebody approached me last night and said, "I'm not sure if you say you believe the millions of years." So anyway, okay. Is there anybody else? Sir.
Another question. One of the things I saw in my when I was taking science several years ago was the so-called evolution of the horse. What were those different types of horse-like creatures?
The idea was going from a multi-toed to a single toe, and also going up the scale in terms of size. So the more they have looked at that model, the more fossils they have found that potentially could affect the model, the less science is actually using the horse evolution models. You see it presented in the picture. Remember the quote that I had from the evolutionists that said, since Darwin's time, 120 years have passed, we've got all these different 250,000 fossil species or something like that, and he said we actually have fewer transitional models than we had in the time of Darwin, which means the more fossils we find, the less likely we're seeing the patterns established. They're horse-like creatures. Oh, they're horses. Yeah. Yeah, except the smallest one is we're not so sure about. Might have been a Hyrax or something, and we're not quite sure exactly what it is. I think that's correct on that earliest one. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So I was wondering about, in the first day, God created light, and then the fourth day,
He created the sun
and the moon and
yes.
stars.
Yes.
Are they different, or is it just a theological?
Well, first of all, the stars is mentioned as a parenthetical statement in Hebrew. Kind of like, oh, you know, he was the one who made the stars. So it's not necessarily part of that first 6-day creation. It's a parenthetical statement. The Hebrew allows for you to look at it that way, as being an earlier creation. Secondly, why does God create light before the sun? Here is a question I have for you. Why does he take so long to make everything anyway? Why doesn't he just say, let there be everything? Pop! Big bang. It is apparent that God is creating time as well, a 7-day week. So now that's part of the answer. The other part is this. Historically, the one object that gets worshipped more than any other thing in nature is the sun. The ancient people apparently had a tendency to think, boy, if the sun wasn't happy, would we be in trouble? So let's make sure the sun is happy. Let's sacrifice or do whatever, and let's make sure that the sun is happy, because we want those crops to keep coming and so forth. Hope the sun comes up tomorrow morning, you know. So there was a tendency to worship the sun. It's almost like God was anticipating that problem and trying to soften its effect by saying, you know what, I don't even need the sun for light. The sun is just the servant. Not making it the big deal. Now, what's interesting about evolution is that the more you read on evolution and their treatment of the position of the sun in life, is, my goodness, are getting close. A few articles are coming really close to practically saying let's bow down to the sun because, boy, it's the reason we're here, kind of thing. It's a very close to a kind of a modern approach of, I won't say coercion because that's over the top, but it's sort of a, wow, sun is everything. Now, no one can deny how important it is in the system of life and everything, but I mean, it just gives it an almost religious connotation. At least that's how I pick it up sometimes. Okay, anybody else? Back here, sir.
I've run into people who talk more about the young Earth versus, evolution from 65 million years ago, and I wondered if you could speak to that. The theory, I don't know if they believe in like 15,000 years or what. But
what?
Versus evolution that came from 65 million years ago. That's easy to debunk, but I ran into a few people that were more interested in evolutionists that were speaking of a young Earth, and I thought you mentioned that last night.
Evolutionist young Earth?
Yes.
I don't know if any evolutionists go with the young Earth.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had some information that.
I guess I don't know quite what you're talking about, which is not an unusual, not to be put on your doorstep.
Well, no, it's just I run into people that they didn't believe in evolution necessarily, or the millions and millions of years.
Okay, now what you might be referring to when I hear a number like 15,000 years is creationists who actually think that maybe the whole Old Testament period is longer. Maybe the flood was earlier. Maybe because that allows for Egyptian or Sumerian or what other chronologies to be accurate, and so allows for a longer dynasty period to get extended back.
I don't know. I ran into
and sometimes you see that, and sometimes they'll use a different manuscript, like a Samaritan Pentateuch or something that allows for a little more time in the Old Testament. It's a little iffy. I don't know. I see the arguments. There's problems with the approach of trying to make it seem 15,000 years or 10,000 or 8,000.
Yeah, I don't know what number they really put with it, but anyway, it wasn't millions of years, and they weren't creationists, really.
Oh, they weren't creationists?
I don't believe so. Yeah, it was really strange.
Okay, guess I don't know. Sir, right here, and then there's up here. Boy, we want to let these people go home. Come on.
I got a question, maybe a little political. How about global warming? Is that a natural process or a man-made process?
That's you're putting me on the spot. Not that that's an unusual thing. I tend to believe that there is something to it. I think the evidence of glaciers and ice caps melting and everything, it seems to me to be overwhelming evidence. What I don't like about the whole picture, though, is what science is not what Hollywood showed me it was when I was growing up. The objective source of, no matter what your theories are, if you've got a better one, let's hear it. We're open. We are open-minded people here in science, unlike those religious people who are really set in their ways.
Well, weren't all the dinosaurs and a lot of these ancient creatures locked in ice at one time, and you had already said instantaneously?
Well,
so
that was
global warming. So the ice age came on pretty fast.
It did.
Is this part of the ending of the ice age with this global warming taking it away?
Some people have said that, but I think it's been accelerated. I think the weather patterns may be changing. But what I was trying to get is, what I don't like about science is, when I say science, I mean the industry or the establishment, is they slam anybody who disagrees with it. Anybody who comes up with, boy, I don't know, the data seems to say, I've got this conflicting data. What should we do with this? Oh my goodness, lock this man up. He's daring to talk against global warming. We all know it's the greatest catastrophe the world has ever faced, and anybody who is clearly an impediment to fixing the problem. So let's lock them up. Let's take away their credentials. Let them speak publicly. Let's not let them teach. On and on. And I'm serious. I'm quoting people as I'm saying these things. And in that same venue, that same thinking is what I see when we talk about creation and evolution. And it's like, don't let anybody get a college professor position. Don't anyone dare suggest that Darwin's theory has any problems in it. Don't even, And that same thing is what makes me react to this whole global, I'm not even talking about the data, I'm talking about the attitude of science towards anybody who would dare suggest it's a natural cycle or anything. I have no problem in
Along
thinking
that
that maybe
vein, I
people
got
made
another
it worse.
question for you. I was raised in a public high school situation. We were taught evolution.
Uh-huh.
How does an evolutionist explain sex with God's creation?
Sex?
Yeah, how did it come about through
By
the evolution theory?
Bimorphism. In other words, yes, male and female, not easy. Seriously, it's not an easy thing to explain.
How did they
It looked like we were created for companionship. Duh. So
how would you explain that?
they can't. I've not seen a good explanation for the two
I
forms.
don't either.
I mean, it obviously works, but it's not the most efficient. I've seen articles where they kind of dreamingly say, you know, why don't we have this one? You know, there's a couple of things that can do it, but I mean, it's like, why? Yeah, it would favor whatever would come up with it. Yeah, no question about it. Okay, keep going. Anybody else? This is it.
The only question, the question I had was,
Can we finish with this? Do we have any others? Let's finish with this.
Okay.
Make it good.
Okay. My question is, before the flood, do you believe that they were messing with the genetics at that time?
Well, you know, what would I base it on? I'd base it on things that might not be very scientific. Spirit of prophecy quotes, a quotation in Genesis 9 where it says God is talking to Noah and say, let's do a few things differently now after the flood, make sure we don't have a flood again. Among other things, I'm going to put the fear of man in animals. That's obviously wild animals, not cattle. And so they run away from you when they see you coming, and maybe there's something hidden in that. So, but beyond that, I was just suggesting some of the kinds of animals look like they're ready for combat. And maybe some of those were bred that way. It's just a possibility, not a hill we're dying on. Okay, that's it. Pastor? All right, if anybody wants to come up afterwards and take a look at these things, you're welcome to do so. Oh! I've got one last fossil to show.
One last thing. Oh.
One last thing, and when I show
Is this a
to
big
kids,
deal?
this is a huge deal. And whenever I've got kids, I show this with flair and drama because it's worthy. Okay, you ready? This is my favorite fossil. Is it not beautiful?
What is it, poop?
This is one of the largest you'll ever see petrified dinosaur poops.
Nice.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's lovely.
Who wants to come up and touch this? Oh yeah, there's a whole field of study on this. There's no doubt about it. I got it from a serious collector. Seriously, a serious collector of poop. There is an industry, there is a company in Utah that does nothing but send their workers walking across the fields of Utah looking for petrified dinosaur poop. Wouldn't you like that on your resume? For 8 years, I looked for poop. But anyway, come on up. This is pretty cool. And when I go to schools, I'm ever remembered as the pastor who brought poop.
Thank you, Stan.
How about that?
You had a
After
good
that,
time?
we gotta end.
Learned some new things. Food for thought. And things that are not food as well. So glad you came tonight, or this afternoon. And for those of you who were last night as well as this morning, we hope that you've been blessed for the whole weekend. And that you'll have something to share, something to talk about, something to study. There's a lot more to learn, isn't there? Let's stand for a prayer, shall we? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the Bible. We thank you for the Genesis story, that we can read the story of Genesis as history, as a revelation of your love, your power, your grace. We would pray, Lord, that you would continue to bless Pastor Stan, Dr. Stan, that you would bless him in his ministry, his influence. We pray that people would be encouraged in their faith as a result of his ministry, but not just his ministry, Lord, our ministry, our influence, how we live. The difference that having a relationship with you and a faith in the Bible as your word, how it does make a difference in our lives. And we just pray that would grow and spread, and oh Lord, how we long for Jesus to come and for us to live in such a way that many others will be ready for that glorious day. In his name we pray. Amen.